A gute Woche and a guten Jahr auf Nissen. And we will try and go over a little bit of this afternoon's Farbrengen. As we will see later, this was the Farbrengen for Shabbos HaGodel. This was the Farbrengen for Shabbos HaGodel, as well as also tied in with the Rebbe's birthday, Yud Aleph Nissen, as we will hear later. Jakob. The Rebbe soll gesund sein began the Farbrengen that we find many in Yonim and Torah that there is a machlokes, there is a difference of opinion. However, when it boils down to halacha, the halacha can only be according to one. We cannot have the halacha and according to both opinions. Both opinions are taket Torah, as the expression goes. Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chayim. Both are the words of the Rabbeinu Shalom, both opinions. However, halacha is only according to one. However, when we are talking about reasons for halacha, here we could have one halacha and have many reasons for the halacha, for the same halacha. And the reasons could be an accumulation of many reasons. Just to cite one very, very obvious inyan, where we have a major inyan, and this major inyan has two reasons, and that is the inyan of Shabbos. Shabbos is mentioned in the Torah in both of the Aseres Hadibros, and each time it is mentioned in each one of the Aseres Hadibros, there is a different reason for Shabbos. Once the reason for Shabbos is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has taken us out of Mitzrayim, and that is why we observe Shabbos. And the second time it is mentioned, it is because we observe Shabbos, that Rabbeinu Shalom was the one that created the entire universe and created the entire world, and it was after 6 days of creation he rested on the seventh, and that is why we have Shabbos. So we have an inyan of Shabbos, and for the same inyan we have two reasons. And these reasons are so obvious and so spelled out, so clear, that it is both of the reasons are spelled out in the Chumash. Furthermore, in the davening, which we recite every Shabbos, we will notice that there are some tefillos where we do say Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim, and some where we don't, in the Shmoneh Esrei. Again, for the same reason, because Shabbos is a combination of both in Yom. Shabbos has this reason, and Shabbos has the other reason. The Rebbe cited an example in the other direction, also from a very famous pasuk. Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Yitzicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. The Rabbeinu Shalom says that He is Hashem Elokecha that has taken us all out of Mitzrayim. So all the Mefarshim ask, why does the Rabbeinu Shalom tie it in that we have to believe in Him as Rabbeinu Shalom because He has taken us out of Mitzrayim? Why doesn't He say something which came much before Yetzias Mitzrayim, and something which is known to in the entire world? He is the one that has created the world. Asher barasi shamayim v'aretz. This is a famous question which is raised in Chassidus and in Svarim. And before Chassidus, this question is raised. However, the fact is, it is raised as a question, but in actuality, when the Rabbeinu Shalom did say Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, what is the reason he gave? Asher Yitzicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. So we see we have again an inyan where apparently we may think that two reasons, we can use more than one reason for this inyan, use a second reason, and the fact is it is not so. We can only use this one reason, because this is the reason HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself said Anoichi Hashem Elokecha Asher Yitzicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. All this is coming as an introduction. Today is Shabbos HaGodel. For the reasons of Shabbos HaGodel, there are many reasons brought in Svarim. First of all, the Rebbe said that it is brought in authentic Svarim that every Shabbos before a Yontef is called Shabbos HaGodel. Memela, the Shabbos before Sukkot, as well as the Shabbos before Shavuos, all of them are called Shabbos HaGodel. However, when it comes down to halacha, the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch only discusses the inyan of the Shabbos before Pesach being called Shabbos HaGodel. Why is Shabbos before Pesach called Shabbos HaGodel? So in Svarim we find many reasons. and brought even in halachas for him. One very famous one is because of Lemake Mitzrayim B'Fchoireim. We celebrate the fact that the Mitzrim, with their own Pchoirim, were in a battle. Because as soon as the Pchoirim found out what's going to happen, that there's going to be a Makas Pchoiris, they resented that and came to the Mitzrim and demanded that the Mitzrim should release the Yidden out of Mitzrayim. And the Mitzrim didn't want to. The Mitzrim refused. Memela, this led to an uproar, which was the Lamake Mitzrayim B'Fchoireim. And as an appreciation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what has happened then, we today celebrate Shabbos HaGadol because of Lamake Mitzrayim B'Fchoireim. This is one reason for Shabbos HaGadol. Another reason for Shabbos HaGadol is that the Yidden were commanded by the Rabbeinu Shalom to take the Korban Pesach. And the Korban Pesach was the sheep, which was the Avodah Zarah of Mitzrayim. And the Yidden went ahead and did it very openly and without any fear, and took the sheep and tied them to the posts of their bed, and something which was seen and obvious by all of the Mitzrim. And being that the Yidden were able to hold out this inyan and had such warm feeling, such ibegegebenkeit, such dedication to the fulfillment of the mitzvah of the Rabbeinu Shalom, and the Mitzrim on the other hand did not harm them for this, so that is why we celebrate Shabbos HaGadol. Because when Taka did the Yidden take the sheep to prepare for Korban Pesach, the sheep were taken 4 days before Pesach, again on the 10th of Nisan. So to commemorate that, we have an inyan of Shabbos HaGadol. If we were to look into Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe discusses the inyan of Shabbos HaGadol, and the Alter Rebbe brings one reason only. Which is the reason the Alter Rebbe brings? He brings the reason of Lamake Mitzrayim B'Fchoireim. The fact that there was a battle with the Mitzrim and their own Pchoirim, and he ignores all other reasons. So the question arises, why doesn't the Alter Rebbe bring another reason? Furthermore, the Rebbe says, if we are saying that this Shabbos is a Shabbos HaGadol, in other words, it is not equivalent to every Shabbos, there is something special in this Shabbos more than in any Shabbos. Based on this, if we have one reason that makes it special, it is Gadol. If we have more than one reason that makes this Shabbos special, it makes it yet greater Gadol. It makes the Shabbos yet bigger. So why Taka doesn't the Alter Rebbe quote other reasons and limits himself only to tell us that the reason we celebrate Shabbos HaGadol is for this one reason, to commemorate the fact of Lamake Mitzrayim B'Fchoireim. The Rebbe explained that we have several approaches to serve the Rabbeinu Shalom. There's a way of serving the Rabbeinu Shalom through the realm of Teva, and there are times when the Rabbeinu Shalom nature, and there are times when the Rabbeinu Shalom does inyanim which are totally out of the limitations of nature. The Rebbe does inyanim which are, for example, the inyan of Lamake Mitzrayim B'Fchoireim. Lamake Mitzrayim B'Fchoireim is something, the Rebbe did something that the Yidden shouldn't have to do anything. Shouldn't have to do nothing whatsoever. Normally the Yidden were having problems with the Mitzrim. Here what the Rabbeinu Shalom did was, he created a new type of thing. That the Mitzrim, with their own Pchoirim, were in a battle. So this is a tremendous mila of a nest which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has shown us. There is no inyan, the Rebbe continues, to take this nest and tie it together with another nest. What are we saying is the other nest? The other nest is the fact that the Yidden have taken the sheep, which was Avodah Zarah of Mitzrayim, and did this with full enthusiasm and warmth to fulfill the mitzvah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Rebbe says, there's no reason to celebrate Shabbos HaGadol because of that. For what then are Yidden created? Yidden are created to fulfill the mitzvahs of the Rabbeinu Shalom. That is what we were created for. To say that we have a Shabbos HaGadol because of that, not so. However, when the Rabbeinu Shalom went ahead and did something to such an extent where he uplifted the Yidden to such a madrege, where the Yidden were able to be involved in their inyanim, and the Mitzrim and their own Preirim had the battle amongst themselves, something which did not affect the Yidden whatsoever, and the Yidden were able to be involved in preparations for Yetzias Mitzrayim. This is an outstanding type of Nes. This is an unusual type of Nes. And being that this is so unusual and so unpopular, it's something which is a different category of Nes whatsoever. Something which the Rebbe involves amongst the Goyim themselves, so that this should alleviate it for the Yidden. And this is, so the Alter Rebbe does not have to add on any other reasons to tell us the greatness of Shabbos HaGadol, because when we really look a little bit deeper into this reason, this in itself is so outstanding and tells us so much the greatness of this day that there's no need for the Alter Rebbe to add on any other additional reasons. Here the Rebbe tied this inyan in to what we're going to be reading about in next week's parsha. In next week's parsha, we read about Nadav Avihu passing away, Bahakrivam, Eish Zara, when they brought a strange fire of Nei Hashem. So Chassidus discusses at length what really happened with Nadav Avihu. Chassidus explains, in Chassidic terminology, there is an inyan of Rotzui and Shov. Rotzui means a thirst, an inner strive and thirst to become associated with the Rebbeinu Shalom. Shuv is when we get back to ourselves with a realization that the kavanah of Dire Betachtoinim is, the kavanah of the Rebbeinu Shalom creating us on this world, is not to have a rotzui and remain with a rotzui, but to realize that we have to come back into this world and serve the Rebbeinu Shalom neshama beguf. This is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent us down onto this world. Nadav Avihu, their error was, they went wrong because they had an inner drive within them to become associated with Rebbeinu Shalom, but how? By leaving this world. The Rebbe may have mentioned it briefly. Chassidus also explains this and ties this in with the Gemara. There's a famous Gemara of Arba Nichnasu LaPardes. Four that went into Pardes, went in for a higher spiritual elevation. The Gemara uses the expression, the Gemara which is discussed in Chagige, of Nichnas B'Shalom V'Yotza B'Shalom. Rabbi Akiva also had this aliyah, this uplifting, this spiritual uplifting, but he was Nichnas B'Shalom, he went in peace and came out in peace. So Chassidus explains, Rabbi Akiva knew that the main kavanah of Dira B'Tachtoinim is that there should be a Yotza B'Shalom. Memele, his nichnas, his entering Pardes, was also with the intention of having the Yitziyah B'Shalom. And that is why the Gemara stresses Nichnas B'Shalom, he went in with the intention of Shalom, and Memele, this led to the result of Yotza B'Shalom. This is an inyan which is discussed at length in Chassidus. There's a famous maimah from the Rebbe Rashab on this on the Seder of Achi Mois, discussing the inyan Achi Tavrish Memtes, and the Rebbe also referred to it today in this way. In other words, we have to understand that our inyan, when we were sent down into this world by the Rebbeinu Shalom, we are here to serve him from this world, neshama beguf. Mamela, we have a rotzui, which is the thirst of becoming associated with the Rebbeinu Shalom. However, at the same time, we have to know that there's to be a shuv, which means the return, coming back into this world and serving him from this world. And here the Rebbe enlightened this with a story, famous story that the Alter Rebbe learned b'chavruse with the son of the Magid, known as the Malach. The reason he's referred to as Malach, he has the title Malach, is because he was really one who was serving the Rebbeinu Shalom totally out of this world. In other words, he had no shaykhs to inyanim on this world. Rebbe said that the Alter Rebbe and the Malach were learning in inyan. And the Alter Rebbe realized that the Malach is up to Kelois HaNefesh, which means his soul parting from him. We're talking in the terminology which we are using now, the inyan of Herotzu, becoming associated with the Rebbeinu Shalom and parting this world. So the Alter Rebbe took a bagel.
Took a what?
A bagel. And put butter on the bagel. And told the Malach that he should eat the bagel with the butter. And he had to eat it. So the Rebbe says, what was the Alter Rebbe trying to prove by seeing to it that the Malach eats the bagel and the butter? By eating the bagel and the butter, he proved them that this is the kavanah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is the intention of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to do, to go through dira b'tachtainim in this world. In other words, serve the Rebbeinu Shalom through a bagel and butter. Take to eat the bagel and eat the butter. Naturally, the Rebbe says when we're talking about foods, we have to be sure that these are kosher foods. But this is the way we are serving the Rebbeinu Shalom. We are serving the Rebbeinu Shalom through our association with Gashmias. By us being associated with Gashmiistic Inyanim. For example, a bagel with butter, which we need nothing more Gashmiistic than a bagel and butter. And by eating the bagel and butter properly, and utilizing the koiches that the bagel and butter gives us to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom, hereby we are fulfilling the kavanah of dira b'tachtoin. The Rebbe mentioned it is not known what inyan the Alter Rebbe and the Malach were learning, which this led to it that the Malach was ready for klois hanefesh. However, as the story goes, which is related from Chassidim by generation after generation, that they were learning an inyan, and as we just told, that the Malach became so enthused that he was about to have klois hanefesh, and the Alter Rebbe calmed him down through the bagel and butter. In fact, later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe also referred to a story from the Baal Shem Tov, similar, that the Baal Shem Tov expressed himself that every day after davening, he was really ready parting from this world. However, it is a nace that his neshama remains within him and he stays in this world. So Rebbe explained, the Baal Shem Tov knew when his time was taka to part from the world. As it is known, stories from various preparations which he made. And at the same time, the Baal Shem Tov expressed himself so. What does this show us? It's also the same idea. The Baal Shem Tov in davening went up to such high madreges that he was ready for klois hanefesh, that his neshama, his soul, should no longer stay in this world. Klois hanefesh, which means his soul parting from the body. However, as the Baal Shem Tov himself expressed himself, it is a nace, it is a miracle that he did remain living in this world. It was in the sikh, the first two sikhs, that the Rebbe also mentioned the importance of saying Tehillim. And he went through the occasions which we say Tehillim. First of all, he said we say Tehillim on Shabbos Mevorchim. On Shabbos Mevorchim we recite the entire Tehillim. Then we say Tehillim daily in the Shiurim of Chitas. And by doing this, every month we complete the Tehillim. Also, it is a customary that the night of Hoshana Rabbah, as well as the night of Yom Kippur, that we go through the entire Tehillim. And this is something, Rabbi mentioned it while discussing an Indian, but he did mention the importance and the great koiches which Yidden throughout all ages have been stressing on the greatness of saying Tehillim. It was also in this Sikhe, which is usually customary in the Yir Aleph Nisan Farbrengens, that the Rebbe makes some sort of a kesher, some sort of a tie between the outgoing kapitel and the incoming kapitel. In the outgoing kapitel, which is kapitel Pei Daled, there's the famous pasuk of Yelchu Mechayel El Choyel Yeroel Elokim B'Tzion, which the Rebbe always keeps on stressing how we are to go from strength to strength, keep on going higher and higher. Incidentally, it was 2 weeks ago, there were a group of individuals, a group of contributors to Chabad houses across the country that came here to 770 and met with the Rebbe. In other words, it was on a Monday, and after Kriyas HaTorah, when the Rebbe walked out from the Beis HaMedrash, they were there, and the Rebbe spent like a total of 10 to 15 minutes with the entire group that was there. So it just dawned on me that one of the individuals told the Rebbe, referring to the Rebbe, you always tell us that we are to go from strength to strength. In other words, referring to this pasuk of Yelchu Mechayel El Choyel. So the Rebbe responded, it's not me that's saying that. It's David HaMelech in Tehillim. who has instructed us that we have to go from strength to strength. It's not something which I'm saying of my own. But anyways, getting back here to the Inyan, here it is discussed how we are to go from madrege to madrege, mechayil el choyil, constantly to go higher and higher. In Kapitel Pei Hei, we have a pasuk, Lishkoin kavod ba'artzenu, to rest kavod, to rest honor amongst us in our land. So the Rebbe explained, what do we mean by kavod, by honor? We mean something. What is a kavod? What is something which we can refer to as kavod, honor? That is the return of the Beis HaMikdash. And the third Beis HaMikdash. The third Beis HaMikdash, more so than the second Beis HaMikdash. Because in the second Beis HaMikdash we are told that there were 5 things lacking in the second Beis HaMikdash as opposed to the first. However, in the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us b'meira v'yameinu, there we will have everything. Memela, when we are talking about Yelchu Mechayil El Choyil, to go from strength to strength, which this was discussed in Kapitel Pei Dalet, what is the ultimate goal of going from strength to strength until we will reach the level of Lishken Kavod Ba'artzenu, which this is the return of the third Beis HaMikdash through the coming of Mashiach. And here again the Rebbe said that it is up to us to bring down Mashiach, and if we will really demand and strongly demand Ad Mosai, how much longer will we stay in Galus? And here the Rebbe says, though there are many of us that seem to think that we have, Baruch Hashem, everything that we need, and we are living very comfortably, so why should we ask for the coming of Mashiach? But the truth is, the Rebbe says that when Mashiach will come, it will be even yet better. We have to look into Torah, see what Torah tells us, indications what the world will be like when Mashiach will come, and we have to know and realize that how good it is now will be much, much better. Memela, it is totally up to us to scream and demand from the Rabbeinu Shalom, Ad Mosai, how much longer will the Rabbeinu Shalom keep us in Galus? It is the furthest point already that the Rabbeinu Shalom should take Mashiach and send him down to us and take us out of Galus and give us the third Beis HaMikdash, and then we will have the Lishkein Kavod Ba'artzeinu. As it's customary in the Farbrengens that the Rebbe discusses an Inyan and Rashi, and as came more recent, that the Inyanim and Rashi which he discusses are those which were questions which were raised in the various publications which come out in the Haaretz Hatmimim and Haaretz Ubiyurim. And by working it in such a method the Rebbe mentioned, this gives us an opportunity to prepare better and to familiarize ourselves with the Inyanim and Rashi, these Rashis in the Sedra, that there are questions and things that are not understood in the Rashi. The Rebbe discussed in today's Farbrengen 2 Rashis. One is at the beginning of the Sedra, and one at the end of the Sedra. The one at the beginning of the Sedra, he went back to later in the Farbrengen and explained it completely. The one at the end of the Sedra, he just left us with a question. The Torah begins in the beginning of this week's Parsha about Zois Tiyeh Torah Metzora, the rules of a Metzora, B'yom Taharosei V'huva Ala Koyin, will be brought to the Koyin. The beginning of the Seder. And then the Pasuk goes on in Pasuk Gimel, V'yotza HaKoyin Al Mechutz LaMachne, the Koyin will go out and will see him and will see that he's cured. Then the Torah will tell the individual that he has to bring certain korbanos. V'lokach Lamitayeh, Shtei Tziporem Chayis Tehoros, he will take 2 birds, Chayos, live ones, Tehoros, pure ones. Let us look into Rashi. Chayos, they are alive. Prat l'treifes. What means a treife? Treife would mean a sick bird. A bird that is sick with something that it cannot hold out, that is considered a treife. So now Rashi is commenting that when the Torah tells us chayos, it has to be lebedike, live ones, prat l'treifes. A treife cannot be brought as a korban with the Metzora. Tehoros, they have to be pure. Parat lo'if tomei. This excludes that a non-pure oif we are not allowed to bring as a korban. Bird. Thank you. Rebbe says this Rashi is totally not understood. Why does Rashi have to get involved here and tell us that when we bring a korban for a Metzora, what the pasuk says chayos, it excludes treifos. When the pasuk says tehoros, it excludes tmeyos. Let me ask you something. How is it by any other type of korban? Are we allowed to bring a tomei dike korban? No. So Rashi should have given us these rules the first time korbanos are discussed in the Torah. Korbanos are discussed in the Torah the very first time in Parshas Boi, where we are told all the details how to bring the korban Pesach. Korbanos at length are discussed in the Torah in the beginning of Chumash Vayikra, the Seder of Parshas Vayikra. So there, somehow, Rashi should have found a way to tell us which behemoths we're allowed, and chayas, which behemoths and oifos we are permitted to bring for korbanos, and which we are not permitted to bring for korbanos. The fact that the Gemara says this regarding to a Metzora, this is no reason for Rashi to quote it. Furthermore, the Rebbe says, if we really want to understand the Rashi, let us go a step further and see how would we learn the pasuk without the Rashi. Imagine there's no Rashi, and we were learning with a 5-year-old child who was learning the pasuk Chumash. He will learn the pasuk. Shtei tziparim, 2 birds, chayos tayos. He will have no questions whatsoever in his mind, and he will go through the pasuk smoothly, and will continue. So Rashi raises a question regarding a treifa. Now the question is furthermore, when we're talking about a treifa, unless she's missing a part of her body, which is one category of treifa, there's another category of treifa when there's something wrong in the inside system of the bird. As we know in Hilchas Treifas regarding a behemoth as well. When we take a tzipor, we take a bird and bring it for a korban, before we shecht the bird, there's a slaughter it or whatever procedure is used, there's no way to know whether the bird is a treifa or isn't a treifa. So why get involved in all these details? Especially in the realm of Pshuta Shel Mikra. And the same regarding to the Pirush which Rashi gives on the word Tahoros. It's definite and it's understood that something which is Tameh we're not allowed to bring into the Beis HaMikdash. So the Rebbe is learning as follows. Also, before we go into the teretz, there is a machloikis in Gemara whether treifa is considered chaya or not considered chaya. A sick behemoth or chaya, which we know will not be able to hold out, but in the meantime it is still alive. Now, when the Torah uses the terminology chaya lebedike, is this treifa, being that it is still alive, though it cannot hold out much longer, considered alive halachically, or isn't it? And from Rashi we see, Rashi learning chaya prat letreifes is a siman that Rashi learns that a treifa is not considered a chaya, is not considered lebedik, even though it is now still alive, being that ultimately there's something wrong with this bird, that this bird will not be able to hold out. We already look at it from a point of view of halachic point of view that it is not considered a chaya any longer. Rebbe is explaining this Rashi as follows. We are here learning the details of a Metzora. What really went wrong with the Metzora? The Metzora has sinned, and that led him to become a Metzora. What did he sin with? He did the contrary of Avas Yisrael. He led to machlekes, he led to arguments and quarrels between ish li-ishtay, between man and woman, and as well between adam lachaveroi, between person and his friend. That is why he is punished in a midah keneged midah. How? Bodod yeshev mechutz lamachne. He is secluded to sit outside of the machna, outside of the entire camp. Why? Being that he created friction amongst people to separate one from another. That is why he is punished the same way. Bodod yeshev mechutz lamachne. Now when he is returning, and he's told by the Torah he's going to bring korbanos, the Torah tells us he brings 2 birds. Rebbe says, if we were to look into Chumash, the Rashi of Chayos And the Rashi, Tehoiros, is really one Rashi. It's the printer's an error that he made him into two. And now let us see why. Chayos, prat letrefes. Tehoiros excludes what? An oif tomei. Why take can a Metzora not bring a bird which may be a treifa, which is a treifa, or a bird which is tomei? Very simple. Rashi goes on to explain. Negoyim, why was he plagued to be a Metzora? Because he spoke Lashon Hara. Shehu ma'aseh pitputei dvarim. What is Lashon Hara? It's talking. Pitputei dvarim is an expression of talking not something which is not chashiv, something which is not worthy. Lefikach, that is why. Huskiku l'taharasa, in order to make him pure, you also need birds. Why? Shemefatvetin tamid b'tziftzuf koil, because birds also constantly make noises, make sounds. Now the bird makes the sounds that is similar to the sounds of the person which he made that led him to become a Metzora. The Rebbe says when one leads to a separation of bein ish le'ishtoi, or a separation of bein adam lachaveiroi, it doesn't happen with one Lashon Hara. There's more than one Lashon Hara involved, and more than two, and more than three. He has to keep on carrying stories from one to another, till it leads up to such a friction that he breaks their marriage, or leads to a separation, bein ish le'ishtoi, or leads to a separation of friends, of bein adam lachaveiroi. This is something which he did with a lot of strength. Therefore, his kalbim cannot be a treifa, a sick behemoth, a sick bird. It has to be a strong bird. Because we see everything here is symbolic to correct what he has done wrong. So that is why it's not that Rashi is teaching us here a general halacha in karbonis, that when we bring a kalbim, it has to be a lebedike kalbim, a live kalbim, and not a treifa kalbim. It is not so. This is a special halacha here, specifically when we're talking about Teiras HaMetzora. Teiras HaMetzora, it's not allowed to be a treifa, and it's not allowed to be an oif tomei. Why? Because all to show that he should become pure again from the big crime that he did, and the crime that he did was such, which was similar to the constant noise making of a bird. He also constantly, with a lot of koiches, put in a lot of his effort in making noise and carrying stories from one to another, which led to these type of results. So therefore, in order for him to correct it, which this is what's being done now when he comes and brings the kalbim, it has to be chayos, lebedike birds, healthy birds, strong birds, prat letrefos, and again, tehoiros, pure birds, prat leoif tamid, to exclude an impure bird. Talking about this inyan, the Rebbe also spoke about the fact that the kohen is obligated to reach out to a person that was secluded from the entire machnas, camps. In other words, we're talking about an individual who's not worthy of sitting amongst Klal Yisrael. Who is the one that was appointed by Hashem to take an interest in this person? The kohen. Kohen is one of the most chashuv yidden. The kohen is involved in higher works. He's involved in serving the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbe says we're talking about an individual who's sitting back and saying he's involved in learning, he's involved in writing svarim, he's involved in writing Shalos Teshuvah svarim, and he's a great Talmid Chacham. So could we demand from such a person that he should get involved with the one who's a Metzora, who is a spiritual Metzora, that his spiritual level is such that he's not worthy to sit amongst other Yidden? How can we demand this from him? And this is what the Torah teaches us here. That it is the obligation of every Yid, how great one may be, that if he's aware that there is a Yid who is somewhere out there, not worthy even of entering the Yiddish camps, it is our obligation to reach out to this Yid and see to it that he becomes a Tahir, he becomes pure, and he's able to enter the Machnis, the Yiddish camps, and he's able to bring Karbonis, and he's able to get close to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Being that we're in the days of before Pesach, the Rebbe said, and the Yemei HaBikur, these are the days of search. We mentioned earlier that the Korban Pesach, the Yidden took 4 days before so that they should be able to search, make sure that the sheep does not have any mum. There's nothing wrong with it, that it is a complete behemoth. So the Rebbe says, therefore, these are appropriate days for us as well to prepare ourselves to Pesach. Memela, Pesach First of all, we have to know that Pesach is a yontif where the child plays a major role. The way the Haggadah is set up, the Haggadah is set up kineged arba banim dibra Torah. The Torah is talking to 4 children, to 4 categories of children, but we know who is the most wanted type of all these children. It is the Bein Chacham, it is the wise one, and therefore it is our obligation to reach out to Yiddish kinder and see to it that they all should be able to be suitable to get into the category of being a Bein Chacham. Especially we see the entire Seder is geared to the Jewish child. We do things and we do strange things in the Seder. Why? So the Shulchan Aruch uses the expression Kedei lahatmiya satinoikos, to make the children wonder, to make the children be surprised, and then they'll ask questions and this will get them involved. So we see how much it is the stress is to involve Yiddish kinder and see to it that they are involved in the Seder, in which the whole union of the Seder is only union of Yitzias Mitzrayim Bechlal is going out of limitations and going out of spiritual limitations which hold us back from serving the Rebbeinu Shalom properly, and therefore they're the same type of thing as with Yiddish Kindalach, who are also in this type of situation. And what is our inyan, what is our Avodah to do before we go to the Seder? It is our Avodah to see to it that if we have access to reach the kinder who are not yet in the category of a Ben Chacham, to see to it, to enlighten them and upgrade them, that they too should be able to participate in the Seder. And in what type of a situation? A situation of a Ben Chacham. In fact, Pesach also stems from the word Pesach, talking. Talking by our mouths. Soch in Lashon Kodesh means to talk. And this is what this Yontif is all about. The Yontif is all about that we have to talk. Talk to whom? Talk to other Yidden. Talk to other Yidden and see to it that they go into the category of a Ben Chacham. And here the Rebbe said another inyan. One of the prerequisites for the Yidden to be able to participate in the Korban Pesach was that every Yid had to be circumcised. What is the inyan of a bris? Bris was bifsarchem, in our flesh, in our bodies, an expression of being associated with the Rebbeinu Shalom. In other words, the Rebbe is explaining this is an inyan of total dedication from a Yid to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Now that we are preparing ourselves for Pesach, it is necessary from us as well to have this total dedication to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and this is the proper preparation for Pesach. In other words, the spiritual inyan of Bris Milah, which this stands for, becoming closely associated with the Rebbeinu Shalom, spiritually it is demanded from us to go through this, for every one of us to prepare ourselves this way for the Yontif of Pesach by becoming totally dedicated to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Another inyan which the Rebbe mentioned, today, another inyan which the Rebbe mentioned in today's Farbrengen is pursuant to what was mentioned in the recent Farbrengens, that being that Erev Pesach is the birthday of the Rambam, the Rebbe requested that publications be made all over in honor of this day, and the inyanim which should be in these publications should be inyanim discussing Pilpulim and Rambam and Shaklovetayas and the Rambam, especially that the Rambam's inyan in his sefer is a sefer of halachas. Halachas, as the Rambam himself stresses, a sefer of halacha, and it's the Rebbe's strong wish that these publications should be published all over, and they should all be ready for this week, which is the Rambam's birthday on Erev Pesach. And the contents of the publication should be with these type of inyanim, discussing various halachas and inyanim which are discussed in the Rambam. Thank you. And by talking about this, the Rebbe again alerted us to see to it that we all are involved in learning the Rambam daily, and see to reach out to other Yidden and see that they too should learn the Rambam daily. It's customary by the Rebbe and the Farbrengens also to discuss an inyan in the daily shir of the Rambam. In today's shir of the Rambam, primarily the inyan of Hitzah is discussed. The fact that we are not allowed to carry on Shabbos. We're not allowed to carry from one reshus to another reshus, and all these details. However, the Rambam discusses How about if we do not carry an object, but we carry a live, something which is live, something which has life to it? And the Rambam discusses two halachas. If we carry a person or a child, or if we carry a behemah, v'chaya, v'oif. And the Rambam brings his opinion that by carrying a person who has life within himself, whether we're talking about an adult or a child, we are not over on the Isser of Metzora. It is not considered transgressing the Aveira of carrying. And the Rambam explains, which the Gemara gives us the reason, Chai noisei es atzmoi. Something which is live really carries itself. Something which has life to it really carries itself. Memela, it is not considered that he's carrying a person. However, the Rambam says, if one carries a behemah v'chaya v'oif, a behemah or a chaya or a bird, this we are not allowed to do. And this is considered carrying. And this is prohibited just like we are prohibited to carry anything else. So first of all, the Rebbe raised the question, why does the Rambam mention only behema, chaya, v'oif? If the Rambam is listing all other, the Rambam is not using a general terminology of balei chayim. The Rambam could have said live things as opposed to persons. The Rambam goes out and spells out behema, chaya, v'oif. What's about dugim? What's about fish? Why doesn't the Rambam mention fish? Perhaps fish have to be carried in water. The Rebbe says, fine. We know a halacha that if one carries a keli, a dish, a vessel, and his main goal is not the dish, but what is in the dish, we don't consider the fact of him carrying a dish. We look at what is in the dish. Memela here as well. He will take some sort of a keli, some sort of a pot, and hold the fish in there. He will hold the fish together with some water because the fish cannot survive without water. Or, this is for a long period of time, or even for a short period of time, he doesn't even need the water. He can take the fish and the fish will hold out for a shorter period of time. And the transgression of the hitzah, of carrying, is something which is committed within a minute or even less than a minute. It doesn't take long to be over on the Isser of hitzah. The Rebbe says really it would be advisable to look into Svarim, search it into Svarim, why Taka the Rambam spells out Behema Chaya V'oif, and the Rambam does not spell out Dogim, fish. Rabbi referred to a Rambam in Hilchis Tmura. In Hilchis Tmura, the Rambam uses the expression that really all the mitzvahs are given with the intention to purify us and to uplift us. Memela, what the Rebbe is drawing from these words in the Rambam is that there is a spiritual meaning in every mitzvah. In other words, there is the mitzvah as the mitzvah stands in halacha, and then there is the pnimiistic, the in-depth interpretation which is given to the mitzvah. Memela, based on that, the Rebbe says, when we're talking here about the difference of carrying a behema chaya v'oif or carrying a human being, spiritually the difference is very obvious between a behema chaya v'oif and an adam. Ruach ha-behema hi ha-yeredes lamata. A behema, what does a behema stand for? The concept of a nefesh ha-bahamis, the concept of evil, the concept of sin. This is something which draws lamata. However, ruach ha'adam, spirit of man, hi ha'ela lamayla. This is something which is towards lamayla, which is here to uplift us, to elevate us. The Rebbe says, when we're talking about having a contact with a ruach ha'adam, with something which deals with man, which is hi ha'ela lamayla, here we say on the contrary, chai noisei es atzmoi, this does not lead to any transgression on the Isser of hitzah. However, when we're talking about a person being involved with behema chaya v'oif, in other words, he's being involved with inyonim that are yerdim lamata, which schlep him down lower. Here the Rebbe says, in fact, Mefarshim also, I think the Rebbe said that Rashi in Gemara uses the expression that when a person carries a behema chaya v'oif on him, it makes it even harder for him to go. In other words, it drags him down. Mela being that it drags him down, so this is something, here we're explaining it spiritually. Spiritually, this is something which puts the person down into a lower madrege. Memela, by having a shaykhus with that, leads him to a lower madrege, so we can't say that by doing that, he's not over on the Isser of Metzora. On the contrary, he is. In other words, this is something which is leading him to an unwanted area. It's leading him to an undesirable area. It's schlepping him down. However, having a shaykhus with Adam, having a shaykhus with Ruach Adam, this is something which is uplifting him. Memela, based on that, the Rebbe is explaining the difference of halachas in the Rambam. The Rebbe also brought to our attention, being that every word in the Rambam is extremely accurate, the Rambam tells us that just like we are not allowed to do any melacha on Shabbos, we are also to see to it that our slaves and our avdoi v'amosoi, how they are to act on Shabbos. To see to it that they should also not do any melacha on Shabbos. Then the Rambam continues, Eved v'omo she'anu mitzuvim al shvisasim, which type of slave and maid are we obligated to see to it that they will not do malacha on Shabbos? Heim avodim shemolu v'tovlu l'shem avdus, those that went through circumcision and went through tefillah, and memela they had the status of a yid, v'kiblu mitzvah sha'avodim chayovim bem, at least they have these mitzvahs which are never is mechuyev. However, these avodim, these slaves that did not go through Mila and Tefillah, but all they accepted upon themselves were the seven mitzvahs of Noach, they are permitted to do malacha on Shabbos for themselves, bifrahesye, even in public. Okay, this is a halacha. Now listen to the Rambam. The Rambam adds on two more words. Ki Yisrael b'choil. Just like a Yid is allowed to do malacha during the week. What does the Rambam have to add on these words? I mean, naturally, a Yid is allowed to do malacha during the week. It has no shaykhus to this halacha. The Rambam is trying to tell us that there are two types of categories in slaves. One is allowed to do a malacha, one is not allowed to do malacha. Fine. The Rambam could have finished this halacha after saying the words that they are muta, they are permitted to do malacha for themselves, even publicly. Enough. Why does he add on the words, Ki Yisrael b'choil? The Rebbe did not give an answer on this question of the Rambam. Another inyan which the Rebbe discussed at length in today's Farbrengen was our responsibility to Bnei Noach, our responsibility to Gentiles, to Goyim. The Rebbe quoted the Rambam that we are obligated to see to it as much as possible, as much as within our power, that Goyim fulfill the mitzvahs of Bnei Noach. There are 7 mitzvahs which the Goyim are obligated to do. We found out these mitzvahs through Matan Torah, but it is our obligation to see to it that the Goyim fulfill these mitzvahs. We've also touched that these are mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, for all the Goyim. Noach stems from the expression of Naicha, pleasantness. The Zohar says this regarding to Noach. In other words, by them fulfilling these mitzvahs, this institutes a kind of feeling of pleasantness amongst them and in the entire world as a whole. The Rebbe elaborated at length on this, how it is our obligation that when we come in contact with a goy, it is our chayv to see to it, to familiarize them as much as possible, as much as within our power, that they become familiar and observe to the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach. The Rebbe also at this occasion referred to a proclamation which was made by the President of the United States last year. And a similar proclamation was made by him this year. And last year it was in the month of Nisan, and so was it this year in the month of Nisan, where the President of the United States, which talking about the United States, the Rebbe said it is a malchus shel chesed, it is a government of kindness, and a government where Yidden can fulfill all the mitzvahs, and a government that assists Yidden to fulfill mitzvahs. And the Rebbe says, halvai, we would utilize all funds and all inyanim which are possible to get from the government that can be of assistance to Yidden. It is an area which is totally not utilized, how much resources are there for funds and for similar assistance which can be gotten from the government. And Mamela the Rebbe also praised the president for this act which came out a year ago, and a similar thing which came out this year in the month of Nisan again, whereby he's calling upon the entire country for everyone to seriously think, give it some thought, and give it the time and effort that every goy, every individual ben noyach should get involved in the fulfilling of the Zayin mitzvahs of Bnei Noyach, of the 7 mitzvahs which they are obligated to do. The Rebbe says when we come in contact with Bnei Noyach, we should see to it that they fulfill these mitzvahs, and also that they utilize their influence on their goyish friends, so that to involve them to all fulfill the mitzvahs of Bnei Noyach. This is something which the Rambam tells us how important it is to see to it that the goyim fulfill the mitzvahs of Bnei Noyach. Another important inyan which the Rebbe discussed with the end of the Farbrengen was, the Rebbe said that it seems like everything comes back to him, that he has to remind everything constantly, and if he doesn't remind it, it is not done. Beis Nissen, the second day in the month of Nissen, was the Yortzeit of the Rebbe Rashab, that is the Friedeke Rebbe's father. This, the Rebbe says, has a very close contact to the Friedeke Rebbe. First of all, he was the Friedeke Rebbe's father, and the fact that Beis Nissen is the day when he passed away, so automatically, by him passing away, this led to it that is the day when the Friedeke Rebbe became the Nasi, the Friedeke Rebbe became the Rebbe. After the sun set, then the sun rised again. Uba Hashemesh v'zorach Hashemesh. Mamela the Rebbe says when we are in days that are Yoime Hilula, days of Yotzeit, that have a shaykhs to the Nesiim, to the Chassidish Nesiim, it is an appropriate time to see to it that Yidden have an opportunity to learn the Svarim of the Nesiim, to learn Mayonas Chassidus, to learn Svarim of Chassidus, the Svarim of the Rabbeim. What makes it easier on an individual to learn Svarim? The fact that he has access to Svarim. What makes it easier to have access to Svarim? When a sale is made on Svarim. When Svarim are put on sale, this makes it easier for people to buy it. And it even makes it easier for the publication house, because they can empty their shelves, and they take in money from the Svarim that are sold, so they have money to print more Svarim, and even fill up more shelves and more rooms with Svarim, so that these rooms should be emptied again and reach out to more Yidden, and by so a complete new cycle is started of more Yidden being involved in learning Chassidus. Rabbi used an expression that to Yidden you would always go over in Russian and say Yid, which is an expression for a Yid, Yid davai groshi. Yid give money, Yid give tzedakah. Rabbi expressed himself in Russian, the same approach has to be Yid, learn Torah. And not only satisfy yourself with learning Torah, but satisfy yourself with learning Pnimius HaTorah, the in-depth of Torah, which is what Torah Chassidus. And what makes it easy on a Yid to be able to do it, the fact that he has Svarim. The Mela the Rebbe demanded very strongly that the publication house of Lubavitch Kahos should make a sale, and the sale should be beginning from Beis Nissen, retroactive to Beis Nissen, until Lag Ba'ima, which Lag Ba'ima is again the Yortzeit of Reb Shimon ben Yochai, whose contact to Pnimius HaTorah is very obvious. The Rebbe said, in order to see to it that the publication house, when it comes again such type of dates, he shouldn't have to remind them that a sale should be made. And it should be simple knowledge that these are proper days, that a sale should be made so that more Yidden will get Chassidish Svarim and learn Svarim. He is suggesting that all those that bought Svarim retroactive from 2 days in the month of Nisan and paid full price on the Svarim should go back to Kahos, and Kahos will give them a 40% rebate on all the Svarim which were bought in the last week and a half. The Rebbe says by Kahos doing that and having to take somebody that should Rebbe expressed himself a buchhalter, a bookkeeper that should go through the figures and working out the rebates and going through this entire system. This will lead to it that when a sale will have to be made the next time, they will announce for it in the right time and a sale will be made. And this will lead to it that more Yidden will be able to learn Chassidus and learn Pnimi Satayra, the Mayonis of Chassidus. And the Rebbe said he will conclude the Farbrengen with the words of the Rambam, which the Rambam uses at the conclusion of his Sefer, that Umola ha'oretz deyas Hashem kamayim layom mechasim, that the time will come when Mashiach will come, that this will lead to it, that the world will become full of knowledge and wisdom at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kamayim layom mechasim. And what leads to this? How do we become knowledgeable of deyas Hashem? This is by learning Chassidus. By learning Pnimi Satayra and by learning Chassidus, Mayonas Chassidus. Another reading which the Rebbe mentioned today, which was mentioned in previous occasions by Farbrengens, the Rebbe said again, it's not that he has to remind it every time, but he is reminding it. This is something to see to it that more Batei Chabad, more Chabad houses are added all over the world, as well as groups for the elderly, Teferes Sekenim Levi Yitzchak for the elderly men, and Chochmas Noshim Bonsa Beisa for groups, classes, adult education for the elderly woman, and also the third Indian which he requested in previous Farbrengens and is requesting it today again, is to see to it that new Tzivos Hashem groups be formed, which will evolve more and more children. And again mentioned that being that we are on the days of Pesach, this is an appropriate time to talk about the greatness of Tzivos Hashem, little Yiddish Kinderlach, to see and bring them close to the Rabbeinu Shalom. I have here with me Mashke, which we were fortunate to get from the Rebbe for this year, and the Metzora Simchas Torah Dike Farbrengen cannot hold it any longer. The Rebbe does not want his Mashke should be sold in Chametz. So we'll utilize this opportunity and give it out here tonight to everyone, and we will say L'chaim. Let us remember it is an appropriate day today. It is the day of Yud Aleph Nisan. We are joining in together with Klal Yisrael all over the world to give the Rebbe a bracha. First of all, he should be gesund and stark. L'arichas yomim v'shonim toivos. He should be healthy, and he should be able to lead us all. L'kabel pnei Mashiach tzidkenu b'mheira v'yameinu amen. And that all his wills and wishes should be fulfilled fully and entirely, without any agmas nefesh and without any meniyas v'yikuvim. L'chaim, l'chaim.